Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Hey, Christy.
Hey, Maggie.
I got you right as you.
I'm so sorry.
You put a cookie in. How are you today? Good if you've got a cookie.
I know, right? Now I'm better. Just kidding.
I think that
time management, I've got to take every little opportunity. Sometimes the days are full. So I'm doing well. Thanks, Maggie, for asking.
Yeah. So we were talking about, we're doing this skills series, right? And we've done the reflective responding, which is the tracking, the content, the feeling. We've done choice giving. And today we're going to talk about limit setting, which tends to be one that students and supervisees have a lot of, I don't even want to say fear, but maybe anxiety. Sometimes this can feel like one that you can't necessarily prepare for because we can't predict what a child's going to do in the room. And so there's a little bit of unpredictability. And so I think that today what we can do is talk about a little of what this is and why we do it. And then later we can go into the how.
I think that sounds like a good plan. I know I have a lot of students and supervisees who struggle with limit setting because for them, sometimes it feels counterintuitive to those 6 core conditions or the therapist's attitudinal conditions that they feel like they need to let a child do anything and everything they want to do. And internally, they have a lot of conflict about the child doing everything and anything they want to do. And so it kind of collides. And so limit setting is such an important skill that many therapists, new, older therapists, can struggle with. So I think it's a great topic for us to cover today.
Yeah. And I think too, for our teachers and even our group leaders, right, that we learn in group is that you kind of set and establish ground rules on the first day. And that's very different than what we do in CCPT. So inherently, by inviting kids into the room, we are setting a loose limit of a lot of the ways that you would like, right? So that's like already kind of like setting them up that not everything goes. But then how do you kind of describe what limit setting is? And I also recognize it's hard to say what it is without the purpose. So we'll try and distinguish them.
Yeah. So for me, it's a therapeutic skill that helps ground children in the playroom. It helps them explore their feelings, experiences, and choices, desires, and wants in a safe and nurturing environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really a big point of limit setting. And what it is this is not in any way limiting the emotional expression of a child, that all emotions are acceptable. And not all of the ways in which we express our emotions are acceptable. And I think that resonates even as adults, right? Like we can't just go around punching people in the face if we're upset. We have to find ways in which we can sit with those emotions, trust ourselves within those emotions, and then be able to express them in ways that are pro-social. And so I think that's a similarity.
I think it's also very different than how maybe we come into being a counselor or a play therapist and understanding how to help children kind of get grounded in, getting themselves under control or taking responsibility or decision making, that we often use like punitive or adults often use punitive or like control seeking, like they want to control the child. So this is going to feel very different. For many, because the goal is that's not what we want to do. We really want to give the child the chance to express themselves, and respect their autonomy within in the playroom and in relationship with us. And so it is going to feel a little different And it goes back to that core belief we have about children, that children have the ability to do this and the capability to do this. So we want to give them that opportunity to practice that in the play space and
Yeah.
in relationship with us.
And I think that's a really good and important point because I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, and I just taught this last Saturday, was, but what if they don't? Right? How many times do I have to? And I don't want to go into the how we do this, but it is an inherent belief that they are capable and can bring themselves under
Yeah.
control. And that's a really big component of what it is and how we kind of express that. I think
Yeah.
limit setting also allows for a lot of predictability within the space so that the same limits that are set one day are going to be set the next.
Mm-hmm.
And just like we are showing up predictably, the toys are in the same space, the room is predictable. What you can do in the room is also predictable. And
Yeah.
so if you set the limit one day, you're going to set it the next.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important.
Well, I think it
And
helps kids know sense of consistency and you responding in the same way that, oh, okay, so in this space I can or cannot do this. Just like when we allow them to do things, right? If a and Maggie and I want to share, we only set limits when they're needed. So I think that's an important caveat within child centered. We don't go in with a list of ground rules. We don't share those ground rules with children because that implies that they are not trustworthy or they won't behave in ways, or it's my need to control the environment. And so in supervision, we do a lot of the, okay, why are you thinking you need a limit here? What's going on for you? Right? How does it meet one of these criterias or kind of whatever's happening so that
yeah,
the child can be as successful, right? With as much freedom as possible in the playroom, because we do want them to have the experience of making decisions and being able to share with us what's going on in their world without feeling like they have to tailor that in certain ways. So by not putting up ground rules, we give them more permission to and more freedom to really come into the session in
mhm,
relationship with us and share as much as they're needing to.
yeah. And I think that's really important. And you kind of touched on a little bit more about like what they are, and that is how we kind of identify for ourselves when a limit might be needed. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think about it limits to protect the child,
Yeah.
right? So their safety, my own safety, so to protect
And
myself.
I would say both physical safety and emotional safety, because often when we talk about safety, people think only physical safety, but we also need to make sure, right, we're not harming the hearts of the children that
Mhm.
we work with too. So we want to be mindful of both sides of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And then to protect the room and the toys, right? Toys are
Mm-hmm.
for breaking. And
Yeah.
you touched that on that in last week's episode on choice giving and the scalping of baby dolls.
Oh yeah. I was like, I think I shared this
You
before.
did. You did. And again, it goes to the point of how it's really hard to tease these apart.
how
But
how
yeah.
they're really all integrated together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the belief systems remain the same. But
Yeah.
yeah. So, and then also, I think the last one that I really think about is how is this protecting our relationship?
Yes.
And so wanting to make sure that if from a child center perspective, we believe that the relationship is both necessary and sufficient. And so therefore
Mm-hmm.
we need to be able to honor that and protect that relationship within that space. And I think when we
Yeah.
go into the how, we can kind of explore what that might look like or how it might present itself within the session.
Well, yeah, and when we are setting limits, we're really focusing on behavior.
Yes.
And I think that's an important when we start talking about the therapeutic relationship, right? It's really about preserving the relationship between the child and myself, or you and the child, or one of our listeners and a child that they're seeing. That we don't want to take away that unconditional positive regard
Yeah.
that really grounds us
Yeah.
uh,
That's
in
a
the session.
foundational. Yeah.
I also think limits help kids maneuver that, like, I want, I need, I have this impulsive focus to do something and to be more mindful of like where they are, what they're doing in the playroom so they can kind
Mhm.
of practice that because we don't always get to do what we want. Or if I have like a desire for something, I can't, go to Maggie's house and eat her lunch. She would probably let me, but like I really, shouldn't, and then leave her with no food in her house. That would not be kind to her, right? And so, like sometimes I will have desires, thoughts, needs that I'm trying to get met, but I'm doing it in ways that are harmful. So limits help kids learn how to regulate that and
Mhm.
manage those impulses, as well as sometimes managing the emotions that they might share in the playroom. And depending on how they choose to share it, right? Because we're really focusing on behavior. So if they're throwing things at me because they're mad at me and they could hurt me with what they're throwing, I'm going to set a limit on that behavior.
Right. And I think that's also, I hear sometimes with parents, or even when I'm working with like school administrators or teachers about this. And well, if they do this in the playroom, they'll think that they can do it everywhere. And one, I think
Oh,
kids are really good at, and I don't mean to appropriate this word, but code switching. They know that how they have to behave in school is different than how they can behave at recess, which is different than on the baseball field or whatever it may be. So they're able
mm-hmm.
to differentiate between those things, but also limit setting helps ground in that reality and in some ways models and imitates what that looks like outside of the space. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
limit setting is a really great way in which we can say like it is very much grounding in reality and helping them bring themselves under control within those spaces and make choices for themselves.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
would agree.
Okay. How are we doing? We do the what? Did we cover?
I think
I
so.
think so too. So then if
Yeah,
we go to
I think we.
why,
So
and I
why
think
we set
that's
limits?
really grounding it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I should set a limit on my cats right now. You really want to play, and now is not for playing. You can choose to be quiet.
Or
That's
they
not
can
a
choose
good
to play
limit.
upstairs.
Yes, I'm like, golly dang, these kitty cats.
The other thing I want to say about limits from a child centered, it's not about having kids not get their need and desires met. It's about how can they do it in ways that is acceptable for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? If that's society, if that's you in the relationship, if that's you're in a school doing play therapy and you know that this behavior wouldn't be acceptable outside of your playroom, right? Like we're going to ground our realities there. So our goal is not to just stop the desire, the want, the need for the child. It's really
Mm-hmm.
about helping them redirect it in ways
Yes,
that they could get those needs, wants, and desires met
right.
in appropriate ways.
It's not about controlling the child. It is
Mm-mm.
it is about the child being able to develop some self-control
Yeah.
and again, I think it's important that all emotions are acceptable. It's just that perhaps not all the ways in which they're expressing them. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of that. And so
Yeah.
if we go to really think
The
about it, and this is
why.
the
No, go ahead.
philosophical, this is you.
Well, I was going to say it's going to sound repetitive. So I do want to say that as we jump into the why, because I think we've covered this. We're just going to kind of spell it out really easily for you, right? The first one is for safety. That's why we set limits. We want the child to remain physically and emotionally safe, um, not only in our space, but in relationship with us.
Mhm.
The next one is sometimes kids' behaviors are challenging. And for us as therapists, right, one of our goals is to convey unconditional positive regard for the child. And so limits help us to continue to provide unconditional positive regard
Mhm.
and prevent us from having resentment, avoidance,
Frustration.
frustration, annoyance with at the child.
Mhm.
And so we might set that might be why we would set a limit. And then, as Maggie shared earlier, we really want to be predictable for kids. We know
Mhm.
that as we are more predictable, it lets the kid know that this space is really constant so that when they're in relationship with me, they'll know what they're going to experience. I'm not going to be someone they're is Christy going to be kind or unkind today? Is she going to try to control me or not control me today?
Hmm.
So limits help us remain predictable for the kid. And
Hmm.
when the space is consistent and we are predictable for the kids, then there is more relational safety and trust within the relationship. So kids can know what to expect. Just a cute little story. I see a kiddo who is 10 chronologically, but not 10 emotionally or socially in my play space. And the other day in session, I forget what she did, but the kiddo came over and sat on the couch with me and gave me a big hug. And she's like, I knew you were going to say that. And I always know when I'm in space with you that you're going to, like, she didn't say
Yeah.
exactly that when I'm in space with you, but when I'm with you, I always know what you're going to say. And I always know how you're going to respond to me. And you always love me no matter what. Cause that's their family reads no matter what a lot. And I was like, okay, I'm doing my job. Because sometimes we need that gentle reminder.
That's
Um,
awful.
yeah, because sometimes being a play therapist is hard work. It's not always confirming that you're on the right track. And for some of my kids who've had bumpy roads, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? So it was a kind thing to hear from my client, but yeah, so I am predictable. I am consistent. And she knows what our relationship is going to be like. So she has a lot of trust coming in. So she's willing to share more because she trusts that I'm really going to support her in her space, right? Or if she gets out of line, then I'm going to help her, right?
Hmm.
Redirect that energy and still get her need met. I'm not going to deny her need or ask her not to feel that way or anything like that. So she knows that in relationship, and that's where I think limits can be really helpful.
Hmm. Well, and it's really going back to not just the core conditions of how we present and allowing us to be able to present with that unconditional
Yeah.
positive regard, that empathy, that genuineness,
Mm-hmm.
but also really the belief and trust in the child's innate capacity that I am trusting that this child is capable
Yeah.
and that they can do that. And that through this experience and with the limit settings, they're developing that recognition of personal responsibility, of self control, of choice
Mm-hmm.
making, that I have this very strong, innate, held belief on their capacity. And that is another way of demonstrating this belief system, even when, quote unquote, some of the behaviors aren't okay, that you're still conveying that through this skill. And I don't have to set limits all that often.
No, again, I think we've shared this on this podcast, right? Like for some kids, you might have to set a lot of limits, and some kids, you may never set a limit, or maybe you
Right.
set one in a blue moon. It really is going to be dependent on kids, why they're coming to therapy, like what their needs are. It might help them maneuver their home life, school life, right? Where maybe they are having more difficulty or there's not a lot of safety for them in those
Mm-hmm.
spaces. And so, that this can be helpful because then they're going to figure out how I can practice those things in playtime, which is what I often see kids do is that they really want to share their world with us. And so they may show how their outside world, how they experience and how they perceive their outside world, which might need a limit, right? Especially if that outside world doesn't feel safe, which might confirm for the child, oh, this is why I was feeling this way.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that I'm bad or I did something wrong. This is just not safe, right? And here's Christy letting me know that, okay, what I was feeling was accurate, right? So really that empathic understanding and lack of judgment about what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
can be brought into the space. And then I can learn how to maneuver that outside of here while while practicing. I don't want to say role playing because it's not intentional. We're not doing anything to initiate it, right? The child is doing. I'm gonna I'm gonna play this out several times to figure out how to maneuver my world.
Mm-hmm. And how it feels and where my
Mm-hmm.
capacities are, where my struggles are, where,
Yes.
and all of those are playing out within the limit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really I think, awesome to watch and to experience in relationship with children. Um,
It's always, I think we don't trust children enough. And when you give them space to really trust them, it feels really magical when they are able to regulate themselves, when they're able to still get a need met and figure out how to do it, maybe creatively. Or
mhm.
when we talk next week about the model we use, sometimes there is a little guidance from us on maybe how to get that need met, but providing them with a little bit of support with that can really then help them flourish and, grow to their greatest capacity.
And I think we didn't kind of talk about this beforehand as we were preparing for this, but also this can be used and conveyed within classrooms and at home. I do think when I talk to parents, I share a lot about, yes, the why and the purpose, and that you're probably going to have to set limits over and right. Like, so the limit of people aren't hitting has remained the same for the entirety of my children's lives. And yet 10 years in, we're still we're still talking about it.
But they're not hitting as
Right.
frequently. There's probably a reason in the moment that they hit,
Yes.
and they may not have the words to convey what they're needing, wanting,
Hmm.
emotionally, expressing. And so, or they tried it, it didn't work. And so now they're going to go to, you know,
Yes.
a physical way to express, to let someone know that they're upset or hurt or mad or whatever, if hitting
And
is
I
the issue,
I
or
do think
attention
it's
seeking.
attention seeking, right? And I think that that's important to convey when you're working with parents and talking to parents. Also, I think to your point about it's happening less frequently, also the location of where it's happening. It's not happening in the classroom. It's not happening on the ball field. It's happening between siblings who have unconditional positive regard in some ways for each other.
Yeah.
Which I think is family relationships play out really differently than other relationships. And I think that makes sense too for adults to recognize that we usually give our truest self and our perhaps the things that would require limits in the real world to our
Mm-hmm.
partners, our parents, our
Yeah.
our closest friends. You know, Christy gets a lot, not usually directed at her, but a lot of like, that I can't do in other spaces because I know that she
Yeah.
accepts me. And so I think reminding parents too is when we're setting limits that where and how and with whom often shifts, even if
Yeah.
it's still happening in other spaces. And so recognizing the wins of limit
Mm-hmm.
setting as opposed to completely eradicating a certain behavior, I think is important.
Yeah. I also, when I'm working with parents or working with students, sometimes I do a lot of exploration, or if I'm working with teachers, why are they wanting a child's behavior to change? Like, what about this behavior is problematic or causing them distress? Or, like, what is their purpose? Because sometimes it's more about feeling out of control. And so I also do some, not only teaching, but I also want to do a lot of reflecting with parents and really listening to what their need is or how this behavior is impacting them, right?
Mhm.
And then how do we help your child learn this skill at home? Because you may have to use it repetitively, but then how do you stay in a place where you can really accept your child, not have resentment or frustration, or want to control their every move, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes limit setting in a desire for them to have a sense of like sanity and safety,
Mhm. Yeah.
they go towards control. So
Yes.
I do also talk about that when I'm talking about limit setting, because I want them to understand that it's not about controlling the child, it's about the child learning to control themselves,
Yes.
because you can't always be there with them,
Right.
right? And so this is a skill we want to help kids develop,
Hmm. And I
so
think
that
that's,
when
oh, go ahead.
no, no, so when things happen later in life, they know what it feels like to make decisions. They know what the responsibility of their behaviors and decisions look like, right? We just get to do it in pint sizes. Instead of really big things, we get to do it around really little things, which are, developmentally responsive, and they get to make those decisions for themselves at earlier ages. So when they get big and grown up, right,
Mhm.
they can have a lot of autonomy and also, a lot of respect for others, just like they have respect for themselves. So
Yeah. And I think that was what I was going to say too, is when I'm talking with parents, sometimes they'll bring in like, well, how is it that they're doing this in your space, but not with me or not at home? And so really trying to
mm,
reiterate, I'm different for, in lots of different ways. And I see that very clearly within my role, both as a play therapist and a parent, is that having someone in a space with one person in strong relationship with focused attention
mm,
and intent in those moments for 45 minutes is very different than when you're at home and all of what life brings and those responsibilities in them, and there's the fear of like, what if I'm raising a bad kid, or at least those are fears that I have consistently. And also it's like sometimes I'm just like, put on your shoes. This,
because I don't have
you
time
know
for this today.
I don't have time for it. And so I really try and remind parents of the differences in those, and that sometimes there are like things that just have to happen. and
Mm-hmm.
and and also, and we'll go into when we do the how, I'll share examples of how I have let my children make, set limits, and they chose something that they then had to, experience what that was like, what that choice was like for them out in the real world. But I do try and
Yeah.
really reiterate all of these points with parents when I'm explaining what it is that we do, especially when they have fears around, well, if they can do it there, what does that mean? Do they think they can do it everywhere? And then also when teaching them skills, the skill to use at home. So I think those are also pieces to consider when
Yes.
you're expressing, because we have to be able to express them to parents as well.
No, you're absolutely right. I know we're getting close to the end, so I wanted to just briefly, I cannot speak today. Sorry, everyone. I just want to briefly review, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
why we set limits, what the purpose is, and then just highlight one or two things,
Yeah.
right? So now that I said that, I'm like, why do we want to set limits?
We set limits to ground in reality and protect the
Yep.
safety of the child, the room,
Yes.
the relationship.
Yes.
We set them to honor their emotional expression while identifying different behavioral expressions of those emotions. So, to honor
Yeah.
that safety with a trust for autonomy and their
Mhm.
capacity to bring themselves under control.
Yep. We want to do it in a really predictable way. We
Mm-hmm.
want to be consistent for kids so that they're not having to constantly evaluate in this moment, how would you respond? It also
Mm-hmm.
lessens power struggles if you're consistent, by the way. I also want to make sure that we're matching our limits to the child's developmental level. We didn't talk about that
That's a
earlier,
great one.
but sometimes we forget. Give too big of a limits to too little of a kid, or we give too little of a limits to too big of a kid. So we do need to be thoughtful about setting limits to the capacity of the child,
Mm-hmm.
and their developmental ability or level, and not always chronological, right? Some of our
Yeah.
kids are going to come in and may need more support or less support. How we set limits and the choices that we give them in the moment.
And congruence and empathy within those spaces too. I think
Yes.
always trying to maintain those things.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to be the same for our kid as much as we can every week, right? So we have to
Mm-hmm.
work on ourselves as well as presenting ourselves.
Well, thank you, Christy. This has been really helpful and an in-depth exploration. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Thanks, Maggie. We appreciate everyone who's tuning in. Please remember to check us out on all the socials. You'll find us under Play Therapy Space. You can also go to our website, which is playtherapyspace.com. It's right above me here. And you can also email us. We'd love to hear from you guys. So if you have ideas, you like something that we shared, please let us know at info@playtherapyspace.com. Or you can email us personally if you want to talk specifically to Maggie. You can email her at maggie@playtherapyspace.com. Or if you want to speak with me, at Christy@playtherapyspace.com. We look forward to seeing you guys next week, as well as hearing from anyone who is interested in touching base with us. And please don't forget to like and subscribe below.
Yep. Thank you, Christy.
Bye.
Bye.